It is Rob Thompson. I got J.W. Cannon, the legend, as my guest on Interview with Influencers. I got to change the name of this because I always stumble with the name of my own show, which is ridiculous. It's a tongue tire. Yeah. So, well, thanks for joining me. I appreciate it.
No problem. I hope to live up to the title you've given me there in your intro. It's legend. Wow.
Well. By the way, I should have talked to you offline about this, but I would say you're my top 3 social media guys out there.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's been a labor of love, and certainly something I was an early adopter of. For work purposes first, and
Yeah.
it just became a very personal part of who I am and part of my own personal brand. So I spend a lot of time on it, and it's nice to be recognized for that. So thank you.
Your Instagram posts, it's not just the pictures, it's their comments that are just the punchlines are just hilarious.
Well, I'm glad somebody else is entertained other than myself. Some days I feel like that's the only person that's entertained by those, but I'm glad it gives somebody else a chuckle too.
You are a master at puns and dad jokes. I mean, honestly, it's legendary. So no, the great thing about it is, it really is a great example of how executives in the industry could show their digital personality, and you nailed it because the content that you put on in Instagram and Facebook and Twitter is so different than what you put on LinkedIn, and you're spot on how you use each platform, knowing what your audience is.
Well, that's an important part of it too. I think there are certain things that are passe in certain mediums that are not so much in other ones. So it's important to kind of understand your audience and the type of image that you're trying to portray in that particular medium. And for me, it's about experimentation too, right? Over the years, I've just kind of found a little niche of where I can kind of fit in the business world, and so far it's worked out.
Were you self-taught in it, or was it something because of your marketing, your advertising mind? Is that something that kind of got you to be a lot more advanced and figure it out, before anybody else really did?
Well, I've always been kind of an early adopter of things in general. That's just my nature. I like to consume a lot of information, but it did really stem from a job responsibility. Back in my days at ING, which is now known as Voya Financial, it was during the height of the financial crisis, and marketing became a challenge. And also, it was at the rise of social media at that time. Facebook was just becoming bigger, Twitter was becoming a thing, Instagram hadn't even really started yet at that point. And we were sitting around a table just thinking about how we can better position ourselves in a market that had become very distrustful of financial institutions, and noticed the kinds of conversations that were taking place in social at that time. And I remember the head of brand at that time said in the staff meeting, said, "Who wants to raise their hand and kind of figure this social thing out?" And I said, "Well, I'll do it. I got some time on my hands. I'll give it a shot." And so I just kind of dove in head first. And for me, the way to kind of do that is really just to get my hands dirty and to invest some personal time in it. And so I think over that time, I learned to not only use it to build up my personal brand, but also how brands can also be more effective about using social. So we were kind of at the forefront of that as well.
I know I mentioned this before, but from an executive standpoint in a major corporation, when you were at UPS and ING, because I know there's so much sensitivity about that. How did you become comfortable in that space? Was it just because you really knew how to leverage it from a personal branding standpoint? Because I know so many executives are so fearful of the backlash that might come out with being aggressive in digital.
Yeah, I think, it just requires a little bit of common sense, and I'm not immune to mistakes. I've said a thing or two in the space that I probably wish I shouldn't have or wouldn't have at the time, but I think you need an element of trust with your employer. And so it was something that when I went into jobs, I explained to them that this was kind of an important part of who I was, and they should be comfortable with that. And if they weren't comfortable with that, then we could certainly talk. But I've never really gotten pushback because I've always kind of used since I made some early mistakes, I've always used kind of the common sense approach to, it's, the old adage about social media, don't say what you wouldn't say to your mother, don't say what you wouldn't say to your kids, those sorts of things.
I know I think it's a lot of it's such an educational process because there's so many, there's so many executives that just don't know how to use it. And especially if you're in a position of whether you're in marketing or advertisement or business development, and you don't know how to use the platform properly, you think social media means 12-year-old girls use it. Do you still see that in a corporate setting?
Not as much. I think, the thing that I've learned about usage of social and where people kind of get it wrong is they tend to dip their toe in it and don't really commit. I think in order to really get the most value out of it, you have to be willing to commit the time and effort and, frankly, just be consistent with putting yourself out there in order to make it work for you because it's an active community, or the people that are in there who get the most out of it are very active, and those are the people that you want to try and talk to. So they want to see somebody who's also participating in the community. So kind of getting out there and being consistent and building your own sort of message and sticking with it, not just doing it as a sometimes thing, is really important.
How important is it right now, do you see, for students and recent college graduates to come into the marketplace? So this is a two-part question. One is, if you're going to hire somebody to be within your marketing department or sponsorship side of it, how important is that skill to you? Not just from understanding creating content and distribution of content, but creating a graphic design, editing. Are those multiple skill set that you would look for within your organization?
I don't know specifically. To me, I look for people who can solve business problems first and foremost, and whatever background they have. I don't even think they have to have a sports background, honestly, to work on teams that I've had over the years. So to me, the most important part is really being able to show that you know how to analyze a situation, to make very thought-provoking decisions, to be decisive in your decisions, to be resourceful in kind of pulling together the resources that you need to solve a challenge, and ultimately be willing to stand up behind it and learn from mistakes, and frankly revel in your successes too. So to me, business problem solving is much. I look at that much more highly than any sort of specific skill like social media. But I will say you can learn a lot from the social space and learn a lot from others. It's a free medium for you to use. There are a lot of people that have opened the door for you to access them on a regular basis. And to me, shame on you if you're not taking advantage of that open door access that you have to all kinds of people in the industry to learn from.
Great. All right. Well, all right. So let's do this. Let's take a step back, because I got a little bit ahead of myself because I just got so excited to talk to you about the social stuff. So talk about, your college experience and how you went from college and how did you get into the business?
Sure. So I was a kinesiology major at James Madison University. I was a multiple sport athlete in baseball and football. Injuries kind of derailed my career early on, and was not able to continue that, and so I had to find something to do with my time. And my outlet to take up the time was to go work at the brand new rec center that we had just built on campus. And so I got really involved in NIRSA, the National Intramural Recreational Sports Association. Got really involved in that and thought that's where I was going to go. I was going to go into informal recreation. I was getting this degree in kinesiology, which had some sports management classes tied to it, but I thought I was going to go into informal rec, and that's where I was planning to continue my career with a graduate assistantship. And right before I graduated, I decided to move back home and do my final internship at an agency, which at the time was Advantage International. It eventually became Octagon, and it's now spun back off as Advantage International. working in their athlete and event PR group. And I said, you know what, I'm going to give up this is my calling. This is what I want to do. Turned down some grad assistantship opportunities and decided to make my way in the world of sports business instead. So that's kind of how I got into the industry initially.
And agency business is always, and I push it a lot because I think you get a lot of sports management grads that come out and think team and league, but you know, how important was that step in your career working for an agency just to see the scope of the different parts of the business? How important was that?
Oh, it's very important. I mean, it teaches you how to solve problems on behalf of a business without having the risk of being inside the walls of that business. So it's a great opportunity for people to kind of learn the ropes and kind of do some different things, and really just learn about corporate strategy and why businesses make the decisions that they make and how they use some of these partnerships and programs to ultimately drive the bottom line or to accomplish whatever goal that they have. And so I always found that agency kind of gave you a low barrier way to kind of work in the brand space without having the pressure of working for a brand directly.
Did you ever think about transitioning over to a team or a league or have that opportunity?
You know, I've never actually had that opportunity. It's certainly something that I've thought about over my career. I don't know that the right opportunity has presented itself. I mean, frankly, I think only until recently the team and league space was primarily populated with people who had team and league experience, which I think was a little bit detrimental to the space. I think more recently you've started to see teams and leagues hire people who came from the brand side or from the agency side who have a little bit different type of experience, and they can add a lot of value to those organizations and bring a different approach. So I think you're starting to see that a little bit more, but it's something that I've never actually gotten a chance to do yet. Maybe one day.
So talk a little bit about, because you had a really high profile job at UPS, and so talk about that experience.
Oh, it was a fantastic experience. You're a Fortune 50 company, global investments all over. My group in particular oversaw the largest investment that we had in college sports. I also oversaw our corporate events and trade show function where we would execute over 500 events annually around the world. And our job was to basically find ways to leverage these partnerships to put more packages on the car and drive revenue for the company, bottom line. And it was a phenomenal experience. It was certainly a challenging one because a lot of people don't look at UPS as a B2B company primarily. They see, the brown trucks that deliver their Amazon packages and think that we are focused on the end consumer, but the marketing efforts that we make are primarily focused on the businesses that deliver those packages. And so it requires a very different and more disciplined and targeted approach to try and reach out to those folks because as we all know, the sports space is very big and it's very broad. It's a very large engaged audience, but there's also a lot of waste in there if you're only targeting a small subset of that audience. And that's really, required us to have some discipline and some focus and really make some tough decisions about the types of programs that we develop to really nail down and get to the folks that we want to talk to.
So say I'm a biz dev guy and I'm working for IMG Learfield even beforehand. How would you evaluate? I know you talked about the BB, that was your important market set, but how would you evaluate properties or sponsorship opportunities from your side of the table? How did you just? What kind of process was it? Were you guys sitting around a conference table, kind of yes, no, or? How would that?
A lot of it's driven from our internal side. I think a lot of the thinking is we're trying to think many years out and see where our business is going and try and match that up with the trends in the marketplace or at the right properties that will match up with the people that we're trying to target down the road. But if it's a cold call, let's say, somebody who's just calling us up out of the blue, first and foremost, the thing that I looked at was, have they taken the time to try and understand my business? You'd be very, very surprised how many people come in with a very consumer-oriented approach. And if you did some simple research and just did some things like read our quarterly or annual reports, you'd see where our focus lies and where we're trying to go. So to me, the people, I could tell right away the people who would be great to work with were the people who took the time to invest up front. Said, I'm going to bring you some ideas because these are the things that I know you're trying to accomplish, and I've done the research, and here's how I can match up the tools in my toolbox with what you're trying to do. Those are the ones that certainly got a second look. I can certainly tell you that we got hundreds of proposals a week. And, I'd say very few of them, that came from the cold call route actually made it through. And that's just more a product of timing. I can say over time, there are certainly some that we've taken a second look at, and certainly ones that we've invested in over time that just weren't the right fit at that particular time. But I always appreciated, first and foremost, those people who really took the time to try and understand what my challenges were and match that up with what they were selling.
Did you find, along those lines, did you find that you were more interested or you had a better appreciation for those same type of folks that came in that did their research, but also didn't come in with a package? They came in, or a package deal. They came in with, how can we help your business and create something specific to help support where you want to go? Were those the ones that are a little bit more appealing from you personally and for your business?
Without a doubt. I think the one challenge that, a lot of salespeople don't realize for folks who were in my shoes on the decision-making side. So we have other jobs other than evaluating existing partnerships or evaluating new opportunities. We had existing partnerships that we had to run. There's obviously all of the things and the responsibilities that come along with working for a brand like UPS, people management stuff, process management stuff, selling in and making business cases for different programs, opening appropriations, those sorts of things. We have a day job. So evaluating partnerships are a very, very small part of what we did. And so, a lot of times, what I would really appreciate were people who didn't come in with the approach of, well, let me sit down and take you to coffee and lunch and learn about your business. Unfortunately, I just don't have the time to do all of those things. I think sometimes you have to kind of, go swing for the fences and go for it and really get it all in your first shot. And I think those are the ones that I really appreciated the most, were the ones who, respected my time, said, look, I know you're busy, but here's some ideas that I have because this is what I know you're trying to do in the marketplace. And it may not work today, it may not work tomorrow, but I just want to show you that we're thinking about how we can better match up with your business. I think those are the ones I appreciated a lot more. As opposed to the guys who just came in and said, well, we can do anything you want. Just tell us what you want. You don't have time for that, unfortunately.
Got it. Yeah, that makes a lot. And what was your cycle? When were you doing your budgeting? How far out were you?
Most times we were planning in multi-year phases, so there are things you can be opportunistic about at times if you catch lightning in a bottle. But most of the time, our investments are planned multiple years in advance. Very rarely do we get something and say, all right, in 3 months, we're going to start that. It's probably something that's a much longer cycle, probably a year or more.
Oh, so talk about that, that one project, and you could go back, it doesn't matter when, but what's that one project that you've worked on that you're really, really proud of?
I think the thing that I'm most proud of is that back in 2003, working for Octagon on the Home Depot account team, I was given the opportunity to be a part of a very special project from the very beginning. It's been around for 20 plus years and now kind of has sort of a cult following and it's kind of become very symbolic of how media and sponsorship can be fused together in effective partnership, and that was College Game Day. I had the opportunity to be a part of that from the very beginning, from the initial set design to what the on-site experience looked like to how we leveraged it in content pieces offline, how we leveraged it online, how we developed in-store promotions, how we worked with vendors to put them into the mix as well. It was a really, really awesome opportunity to be at the ground floor, and I'm really proud to see how far that's become. And frankly, what's cool for me is to see that some of the things that we implemented going back to 2003, are still very much in place today. They've adapted, obviously, for modern times, but simple things like the look and feel of the show and all the orange and the hard hats and the signage and things of that nature. A lot of those early building blocks are still there.
The Home Depot, was that the original
Yeah.
sponsor? Yeah.
They were not the original sponsor. I think Discover Card was there before, but Home Depot was the first company that kind of came in and treated what was more of a traditional media buy as a traditional sponsorship property.
So how did that process work for those that don't really know the agency side? Was it something that Advantage represented Home Depot, and did you find the opportunity for them on their behalf, or did they say, the Home Depot come to you and say, hey, we have this opportunity with ESPN with something they're calling Game Day. You guys figure it out.
A little bit of both. I mean, Home Depot's obviously been a long-time advertiser with ESPN, and obviously it meets the right demographic of the people that they're targeting. So there's always these thought sharing sessions with the salespeople and with the marketing people on the ESPN side, and with the marketing people at Home Depot, just tossing out ideas. And so I think a lot of those ideas are generated just through those discussions and those brainstorming sessions. But I will say this, it took a little bit of forethought to think about College Game Day a little bit differently than what they would normally look at a traditional media buy as, because at the end of the day, it was only reaching 1.5 million people at that time, and the price that was charging for that was certainly at a premium to reach that audience, more so than what you would pay to reach that same audience in other parts of the network. And so I think it took a little bit of forethought to really understand how you could leverage and harness the power of that property in a unique way. And you could say, I mean, you look at it 14 years later, they're still there. So I think it's been a very, very successful partnership.
So talk about mentors, mentors in your career and folks that helped you out along your way.
Yeah, I've had a lot of them, some informal, some more formal, some just kind of thought from a thought leadership perspective. I've always admired folks like Mike Veck and Bill Veck, and even going far back to P.T. Barnum, people who weren't afraid to take risks, who weren't afraid to make a little bit of fun of themselves, weren't afraid to, step off into the deep end every so often, and ultimately sometimes almost drown, but resurface. From an informal standpoint, I've always looked up to folks like that. From a formal standpoint, I have to look back to some of the folks that brought me in at Octagon, folks like Jeff Aaronkrantz or Woody Thompson or Mark Crepeau. Woody and Jeff are still there. Mark is now the VP of Marketing and Sales at the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame up in Springfield, Massachusetts. And I think what I really learned from them is, what I talked about earlier, is like how to really effectively dissect a challenge, how to really creatively solve problems, ultimately how to analyze results and provide recommendations back on how we should interpret those results. I think I owe a big debt to those guys for kind of really forming the base of my knowledge set that I still use today.
So important. So I couldn't talk enough about how much of an impact mentors had in my career as well. And sometimes it's one of the soapboxes I get on with some of our student athletes and folks that I'm in daily contact with through a university space, is just latch on and network and find those right people that you find have a high level of character, that really present themselves well. And those are the guys and women that you find that, without a mentor, and especially in this industry, it's very tough to grow and expand in your business, and so I know you're going to be I'm sure you're a great mentor for a lot of people so far. I know you are on my LinkedIn. You're in Instagram. You're a mentor for me.
Well, that's to your detriment.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So what kind of advice do you give, that recent graduate in the sports management world? Because last year there's over 30,000 of them, fighting for jobs, whether it's with an agency or team or a league. And if you were to give yourself advice back when you were 19, 20, 21 years old, what would it be?
I mean, it's a scary marketplace. I mean, first and foremost, I mean, that number is pretty sobering when you think about the number of jobs that are already very scarce in the industry, but the growth of sports management platforms and degree programs that focus on sports management. I mean, it's amazing to me how many people still want to go into this industry, knowing like how few opportunities there are that exist. So that you got to find a way to cut through the clutter. And at the end of the day, to me, there are a couple of things that really stand out when I look at kids coming out of school, because a lot of them look very, very similar on paper. They all got the similar classes, but I look at their project work. If they went to a school in Virginia like I did they take a risk and go do special projects or internships outside of their immediate geo? Who do they know in my network that might be able to vouch for the work that they've done for them? Those are the things that I kind of look at. More so than the actual experience that they have. I look at kind of the depth of the experience and whether these people are willing to kind of step outside of their box. Yeah. What I've found is with a lot of these sports management students, they'll do what's very comfortable for them, right? Not a lot of them want to move away from home. A lot of them want to stay near, the parents and the girlfriend or the boyfriend or the significant other. And they're not willing to kind of step outside of their comfort zone when given the opportunity to do so, whether it be for summer internships or practicums or projects. I've always encouraged kids, don't do what's most familiar and what's most easy. And I'll use an example of when I was in school, my a risk management project, whereas most people were going to do something in the Washington, D.C. area at a venue that had been done 1,000 times. Well, I happened to be going to spring break in St. Augustine, so I took a drive up to Jacksonville and went and met with the head of Alltel Stadium and did my project on that. So just do something to stand out a little bit different, and that's just a simple way to do that. So I look for things like that, and I would highly encourage students who are looking to get into this industry to kind of do those sorts of things and really broaden the base of people that are in their influential circle.
I had Michael Kelly from the College Football Playoffs was a guest of mine about a year or so ago, and he said something very similar to what you just said too. And the way he broke into the bowl business or the football bowl business right out of college, he jumped in his car and he drove all the way down to Miami at the Orange Bowl because he thought that would be a pretty cool place to work. And he said he sat in the parking lot and he waited for the doors to open in the morning, and he went in the lobby and he said, I'm here to talk to somebody about an internship. And they said, you have an appointment? He says, no, I just drove down from, I think he was in New York or Pennsylvania. And he said, I just drove down, and he says, that's how he started. The guy hired him right there on the spot. And that's it. That's how he started his career. And he's been in that business for a very long time. And, and he said the same thing. Sometimes a geographical, change in location is a great thing for your career. And it's true.
No doubt. I mean, it sounds cliche, but it is definitely not about what you know. It is more about who you know, because at the end of the day, when you're coming out of college with a 4-year degree with several hundred other people who just came out of the same program, you're all going to look very, very similar on paper. But what sets you apart is your willingness to take risk and that flexibility and who you know. I mean, that's what sets you apart in the pile, and that's what's really going to help you kind of elevate yourself to the top of the resume pile when getting considered for jobs.
Right. So what's next? What's your next adventure? You want to talk about that?
Well, in a couple weeks, I'll be joining the American Cancer Society and working in their sports partnership group. They have a number of great partnerships. Everybody's familiar with their one with the NFL, but with minor league baseball, they've got some partnerships in Major League Baseball and NASCAR and golf. And so I'm looking forward to a different challenge. It's certainly a different facet of skills that I'm going to have to tap in to work for a nonprofit and to really learn how to use the skills that I have to raise funds as opposed to drive revenue, which is a very different ask of people. So I'm really looking forward to the challenge. I don't quite know what I'm getting into 100%, but that's part of the fun about what I'm getting into. I like having that a little bit of uncertainty and that little kind of ball in your gut that gives you a little bit of nervousness, because I think for me, it helps me elevate my game. So I'm really looking forward to that challenge.
That's awesome. It's a job with a purpose and make a difference in people's lives. And you're right about that. Sometimes you don't grow unless there's a little bit of being uncomfortable, right?
Very true.
Very true, yeah. And I think you learn that as you start looking back at your career, and I know I do. It's like, boy, man, the times that I had the best times of my career were always when I was the most uncomfortable.
Most definitely.
So, well, I appreciate your time. I really do, and you've always been a guy who I thought of highly in this business, and I'm glad we were able to meet and talk and connect. And for whatever you do, please find the time for you and Lou to brush off, your Twitter accounts and get back out there with the SB Chat again. I think you had a lot of fans with that one. I loved it.
We'll see what 2018 holds. We've had some discussions about that, and after doing it for 6 straight years and kind of being the early pioneers in space, it was just time for a little bit of a break. But yeah, I think you'll see us back sooner rather than later.
Nice, I love it. Well, JW, you're a true pro, man, and I know they're lucky to have you over there at the American Cancer Society. And tell my man Anthony Marino I said hello when you finally meet him, and you're gonna love that guy. Great organization, and I know that the next chapter in your life is going to be as successful as the last one you just had. So just another chapter in your book.
Very true. Very true. I appreciate the time, and thanks for having me.
You bet. So Rob Thompson here with JW Cannon, interview with influencers. I didn't stutter on that.